Have you ever walked past a street corner and seen something so heartbreaking you couldn't look away? On a cold sidewalk, beneath the flickering streetlights, sat a small German shepherd puppy, his eyes wide with confusion and fear, and around his neck hung a sign that simply read, "Please, don't abandon me." If stories like Toby's touch your heart, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and share, because sometimes all it takes is your kindness to rewrite someone's story. The afternoon sun had long since disappeared behind the buildings of Willow Creek, leaving shadows to stretch slowly across the sidewalks. Toby, a young German shepherd just barely 8 months old, sat quietly on the edge of the curb, shivering slightly from the chill. His sleek black and tan coat, usually shiny and full of youthful energy, now looked dusty and tangled from days spent alone. His deep amber eyes gazed up anxiously at each passing face, silently pleading for someone, anyone, to notice him, to stop, to care. Yet each footstep continued to echo onward, leaving him behind like a forgotten whisper. Toby could feel the cardboard sign around his neck, gently swaying with every chilly gust. Its simple words, scribbled hurriedly in thick marker, read, "Please don't abandon me." The message was short, clear, and heartbreaking, yet it seemed invisible to the hurried strangers bustling by, their faces buried in phones or hidden behind the protection of busy thoughts and determined avoidance. A cold breeze whispered through his fur, causing Toby to shrink deeper into himself. He curled his tail tighter around his thin body, but it provided little comfort against the damp air settling into his bones. His mind wandered painfully back to brighter days, to the warm laughter of his family that once filled a home where he had been so deeply loved. He remembered his owner, Emily, a gentle woman with soft brown curls and sparkling green eyes, who had once lifted him high into her arms with a laugh so joyful it echoed in his dreams. Her husband, John, a tall man whose deep chuckle always signaled treats and playful wrestling matches on the soft living room carpet. And little Luke, their energetic 6-year-old son, whose giggles and hugs had become Toby's favorite part of every morning. But those warm memories only made the sidewalk seem colder now. It had all changed so suddenly. One day, the house filled with boxes, quiet whispers, and worried glances. Emily had held him closely, tears staining her cheeks, and whispered words he couldn't understand but whose sadness was unmistakable. John's usually cheerful face had turned solemn, and Luke clung to Toby, sobbing gently into his fur. Then, in a blur, Toby found himself here, alone on an unfamiliar street, with a cardboard sign that weighed heavier on his heart than around his neck. The sound of footsteps grew louder, snapping Toby back into the cold reality. His ears perked hopefully as an older man approached, wearing a thick wool coat and a hat pulled low against the chill. The man paused for a brief moment, his eyes scanning the pitiful figure sitting forlornly on the sidewalk. For a heartbeat, hope surged through Toby's body, but the man shook his head sadly and continued onward, shoulders slightly slumped as though carrying regret. With a soft sigh, Toby lowered his head onto his paws, his heart aching deeply. He wondered if this was what it meant to be truly alone, forgotten, invisible. Nighttime shadows deepened, blending with the growing darkness of the street as the city gradually quieted around him. Toby closed his eyes, trying to fight back the cold and loneliness that crept through his fur like icy tendrils. Somewhere deep inside, a small flicker of hope still burned stubbornly, refusing to be extinguished completely. It whispered gently in his ear, telling him that perhaps tomorrow would be different, that maybe someone would pause long enough to read the desperate message around his neck and truly see him. And maybe then, just maybe, he would finally find his way back to warmth, back to love, back to home. The early morning sun softly painted the small town of Willow Creek in hues of pale gold, gently illuminating the quiet streets and modest homes. Olivia Harris, a 65-year-old widow, was slowly making her way along Main Street toward the local grocery store. Olivia had lived in Willow Creek all her life. It was where she'd met her late husband, Walter, whose laughter had filled her home for 40 years, and whose passing had left a silence she still struggled to bear. Her gray hair, neatly pinned up beneath a faded blue scarf, framed a face etched with gentle wrinkles that told stories of joy, love, and quiet sorrow. Olivia's clear blue eyes, once vibrant with laughter, now held a quiet resignation, accustomed to solitude yet longing secretly for something more. As she turned onto Fifth Avenue, a sudden movement caught Olivia's eye. Near the edge of the sidewalk, beneath a maple tree losing the last of its autumn leaves, sat a small, shivering figure. Her steps slowed unconsciously as curiosity and concern mingled in her chest. There, on the cold sidewalk, sat Toby, his black and tan coat dusty and tangled, eyes heavy with an exhaustion that felt all too familiar to Olivia. Around his neck hung the heart-wrenching sign, "Please don't abandon me." A sharp breath caught in Olivia's throat, and an unexpected wave of emotion tightened her chest. The sight of Toby, alone and so obviously heartbroken, triggered memories she thought she had tucked safely away, memories of Max, her faithful Labrador who had passed away 2 years ago. Max had been her companion through the loss of Walter, his presence a comforting warmth that had softened the sharp edges of her grief. Losing Max had reopened a wound Olivia believed had healed. The emptiness that followed convinced her she could never again endure the heartache of loving and losing a pet. She stood frozen, her hand gripping tightly onto the strap of her purse as she watched Toby. The puppy lifted his head slightly, ears twitching hopefully, as though sensing the weight of her gaze. Their eyes met, and for a brief, heartbreaking moment, Olivia saw her own loneliness reflected clearly in his eyes, deep amber pools that mirrored her unspoken grief. Her pulse quickened, a painful longing warring with her carefully guarded resolve. "I can't," Olivia whispered softly, more to herself than to anyone else, feeling the old ache of loss grip her tightly. She remembered how empty the house had felt after Max died, his favorite toys abandoned, his bed untouched, the silence deafening. The fear of experiencing that emptiness again was overwhelming, and Olivia turned her gaze downward, determined to walk away before she lost her resolve. But her feet refused to move, rooted stubbornly to the ground as her heart fought against her mind. She glanced up again at Toby, who seemed to have sensed her hesitation, his tail softly wagging once, almost shyly. It was a small gesture of hope, cautious and hesitant, but it felt to Olivia like an invisible thread tugging at her heart, urging her closer. Olivia hesitated, the silence around her thickening as memories of Max flooded vividly back, overwhelming her with both the sweetness of companionship and the bitterness of loss. "I'm sorry, sweet boy," she murmured quietly, her voice thick with sorrow. With great effort, she tore her gaze away, forcing herself to step forward, moving past Toby and continuing down the street. Her footsteps felt impossibly heavy, each step echoing her inner turmoil. Throughout the day, Olivia's mind wandered restlessly, unable to shake the image of Toby waiting alone on the cold street corner. As she moved about her chores, preparing meals for one and tidying rooms no one but herself would use, Olivia felt an emptiness she had long tried to ignore, resurfacing with painful intensity. She found herself glancing toward the window repeatedly, haunted by the memory of the lonely puppy she had left behind. As evening settled gently over Willow Creek, Olivia wrapped herself tightly in Walter's old cardigan, its familiar scent offering a bittersweet comfort. She sat quietly in her favorite armchair, eyes drifting to the framed photos on the mantel, Walter smiling on their wedding day, Max proudly holding a ball between his paws. A slow tear slipped down her cheek, her heart aching not just with loss, but with guilt and regret. "Maybe, just maybe," Olivia whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Maybe I can't keep living afraid of losing again." Her eyes drifted toward the street beyond her window, her mind drawn irresistibly back to Toby, who needed someone to love him as desperately as she needed someone to care for. In that moment, Olivia realized the fear that had kept her isolated was slowly being eclipsed by a tender courage, an urge to reach out, to heal, and perhaps to find hope once more. As days melted into each other, Olivia Harris found herself drawn irresistibly toward that small street corner beneath the maple tree, her heart restless and burdened by a quiet longing she could no longer ignore. Each morning, shortly after sunrise, she would gently wrap herself in Walter's old cardigan, collect some food in a small woven basket, and slowly make her way down Fifth Avenue. She moved softly, with cautious steps, almost afraid to admit the truth even to herself, that the young German Shepherd puppy had somehow become a silent, yet powerful presence in her lonely days. From a cautious distance, she watched Toby, who still sat quietly, the cardboard sign around his neck now slightly crumpled from wind and weather, but no less heartbreaking. Each day, Olivia left something behind: a bowl of fresh water, carefully placed beneath the shade of the tree, a sandwich wrapped neatly in foil, or a few tender pieces of chicken she'd cooked the night before. Her offerings were simple gestures, yet they spoke profoundly of the gentle compassion that had begun to blossom again in her heart. At first, Toby observed her cautiously, ears perked, his expressive eyes following her movements with a mixture of curiosity and guarded hope. He had learned quickly the harshness of being left behind, and trust was now something he gave sparingly. Yet each day, as Olivia left her gifts and retreated to watch from afar, Toby inched a bit closer, sniffing cautiously before eating, his small tail giving an uncertain wag, a faint glimmer of joy flickering within his lonely heart. One particularly cold morning, as Olivia set down a bowl filled with warm homemade stew, Toby raised his head and whined softly, his amber eyes meeting hers in a pleading gaze that gripped her soul. Olivia hesitated, frozen in place by a surge of tenderness, suddenly understanding that their silent exchanges were no longer just about food or water. They had become an unspoken conversation, a gentle dance of mutual longing and tentative trust. "You're not alone, little one," Olivia whispered quietly, hoping somehow Toby would sense the depth of her words. She stepped back, sitting down gently on a nearby bench, her fingers curled tightly in her lap, afraid any sudden movement might frighten him away. Toby cautiously approached the bowl, eyes never leaving Olivia's face as if searching for reassurance that she wouldn't disappear again into the faceless crowd of strangers. He ate slowly, the warmth of the stew visibly comforting him, his gaze flickering repeatedly toward Olivia with a growing warmth. From that day onward, something subtle yet profound shifted between them. Toby began anticipating Olivia's visits with growing eagerness, his heart beating faster each morning when he heard her soft, familiar footsteps echoing gently along the sidewalk. Olivia, too, found herself awake earlier each day, her heart lighter, a gentle smile gracing her lips as she prepared meals with newfound care, imagining the puppy's cautious delight at her arrival. Though she still kept a respectful distance, careful not to overwhelm him, Olivia's gentle voice often filled the quiet mornings as she spoke softly about simple things, the changing leaves, memories of happier times, or small stories from her days as a young school teacher. Her words wrapped warmly around Toby, soothing his anxious heart, slowly weaving an invisible bond of companionship and comfort. One morning, Olivia noticed a slight change in Toby's demeanor. Instead of simply watching her cautiously, the puppy rose and slowly approached, stopping just a few feet away, his small frame trembling slightly. Olivia felt her heart catch in her throat, overcome by both joy and sadness at his vulnerability. Carefully, she reached out a gentle hand, whispering softly, "It's okay, Toby. I won't hurt you." After a moment's hesitation, Toby leaned forward, lightly brushing his cold nose against her fingertips, his eyes wide with tentative trust. In that single moment, Olivia felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and responsibility fill her heart. She realized this small, frightened puppy had given her something precious, a reason to move beyond her grief and fear, a quiet reminder that loneliness could be conquered through patience, trust, and love. And though the autumn air was still chilly around them, a warmth had begun to radiate quietly between Olivia and Toby, a fragile but strengthening bond, promising hope and companionship for both their hearts. The morning sky had darkened suddenly, and thick gray clouds swallowed the soft golden hues Olivia had grown accustomed to seeing each dawn. Rain began falling gently at first, drizzling softly onto Willow Creek's quiet streets, but quickly turned fierce, drumming loudly on rooftops and splashing in growing puddles. Olivia stood anxiously by the window, heart twisting painfully as she pictured Toby shivering alone beneath the now leafless maple tree. The harsh rain seemed to echo the heaviness she felt in her heart, each drop a reminder of her lingering hesitation and fear. Unable to bear it any longer, Olivia pulled on her heavy coat, grabbed an old umbrella from the stand near the door, and stepped determinedly out into the storm. Cold rain pelted her coat and scarf, soaking through within minutes, but Olivia pressed forward, her thoughts consumed only with the young German shepherd who had quietly stolen her heart. When she arrived at the familiar street corner, Toby was huddled beneath the scant protection of a small bench, visibly trembling, his soaked fur clinging tightly to his thin body. He lifted his head at her approach, eyes wide with a blend of relief and fear. Without a word, Olivia gently knelt beside him, carefully extending her hand as raindrops streamed down her cheeks. "Come, Toby," she said softly, her voice shaking with emotion. "Let's go home." Toby hesitated briefly, his body tensing with the remembered hurt of abandonment, but the softness in Olivia's voice, the warmth in her gentle gaze, slowly coaxed him forward. Olivia carefully wrapped him in the old cardigan she had brought, lifting him gently into her arms. Toby relaxed slightly, instinctively pressing his cold, wet nose into the soft fabric that held her scent, a scent he'd come to recognize and trust. Together, they hurried through the pouring rain back to Olivia's small, cozy house. Inside, warmth surrounded them instantly. Olivia placed Toby gently down in the living room near the old fireplace, its gentle embers still glowing softly from the night before. Toby stood uncertainly, ears flattened against his head, eyes darting around cautiously. Olivia knelt once more, her expression calm and reassuring. "It's all right, Toby. You're safe now," she whispered, slowly reaching out to stroke his damp fur. Toby flinched slightly at first, the old fears resurfacing momentarily, but Olivia's steady patience and unwavering kindness soon calmed him. Gradually, he leaned into her touch, warmth, slowly thawing the cold fear that had held him captive for so long. As the hours passed, Olivia stayed close, carefully drying Toby with a soft towel, speaking softly as she worked. The gentle rhythm of her voice soothed him, each comforting word building an invisible bridge between their hearts. Olivia prepared a warm meal for Toby, placing it carefully before him on the kitchen floor. He ate slowly at first, still hesitant, still wary of sudden change, but the warmth of Olivia's home and the gentle presence of her quiet affection began to reassure him. Over the following days, Toby explored Olivia's home with growing curiosity. Each corner held remnants of Olivia's past, old photos of Walter smiling warmly, worn dog toys that once belonged to Max, but also whispered promises of new memories waiting to be made. Toby gradually claimed a small space near Olivia's armchair, curling up each evening as she sat nearby, knitting or quietly reading, the peaceful silence between them filled with mutual understanding and growing trust. Olivia, in turn, felt an unfamiliar joy blossoming quietly within her, a tender gratitude that eased the ache of past losses. Each morning brought new discoveries, simple joys like Toby eagerly greeting her at her bedroom door, his small tail wagging gently but with increasing confidence, or his warm presence following her through the house as she performed daily tasks. Olivia recognized that this newfound companionship, tenderly nurtured through patient care, was healing not only Toby's wounds but her own as well. One quiet evening, as Olivia gently stroked Toby's now sleek, healthy coat, the puppy rested his head on her lap, sighing contentedly. Olivia felt her heart swell with tenderness, the last shadowy vestiges of fear and loneliness beginning to dissolve completely. In that gentle, unspoken moment, both Olivia and Toby silently acknowledged what neither could fully express aloud. They had found in each other a sense of belonging, comfort, and the enduring promise of trust, a bond stronger than past hurts and deeper than the fears that once kept them apart. Weeks flowed gently by, like a quiet river slowly healing the landscape of Olivia Harris's life. Toby, the young German shepherd who had entered her home and heart, had grown stronger, his sleek black and tan fur now shimmering with vitality. His amber eyes, once clouded by fear, now sparkled with warmth and trust whenever Olivia spoke his name. Together, they rediscovered joy in the simplest moments, The quiet comfort of early morning walks through Willow Creek's tree-lined paths, the warmth shared by the fireplace during chilly evenings, and the small, tender gestures of companionship that spoke louder than words. Olivia herself had changed in ways she hadn't imagined possible. The lingering sadness that had shadowed her since losing Walter and Max had softened, replaced now with quiet laughter and gentle smiles. Each morning brought a newfound eagerness to embrace the day, her steps lighter as Toby trotted faithfully by her side. Her neighbors, noticing her growing happiness, began to wave more often, exchanging greetings and heartfelt smiles. Toby's friendly presence became a welcome sight throughout the small town, subtly binding the community closer together. One crisp autumn afternoon, while strolling near the town's central park, Olivia encountered her neighbor, Margaret Wilson, a cheerful woman in her early 70s with short silver curls and lively blue eyes. Margaret was active in a local animal welfare group, a circle of residents who gathered regularly to support pets and their owners. Seeing Olivia with Toby, Margaret stopped to chat, delighted by the obvious bond between them. "You know, Olivia," Margaret suggested warmly, "you and Toby should join our little group. Sharing your story could inspire others, especially those who feel afraid to open their hearts again." Olivia hesitated at first, unsure if she could share something so personal and tender, but Toby's gentle eyes nudged her forward. She attended her first meeting a few days later in a cozy community room filled with soft voices and welcoming faces. Surrounded by caring individuals who had each experienced love, loss, and renewal, Olivia felt immediately at ease. That evening, sitting comfortably with Toby curled quietly at her feet, Olivia shared their story. Her voice, soft and sincere, described the loneliness that had shadowed her days, the heartbreaking image of Toby sitting alone on a cold sidewalk, and the healing journey they had undertaken together. The room grew quiet, the listeners deeply moved by the honesty and depth of Olivia's gentle narration. Tears glistened softly in many eyes, each heart touched by the powerful reminder of love's resilience. When Olivia finished speaking, a warm silence lingered briefly before applause filled the room, gentle and heartfelt. Afterwards, several community members came forward to embrace Olivia, thanking her for the courage to speak openly about loss, healing, and the importance of love. Among them was Thomas Carter, a retired high school teacher with deep-set brown eyes and a warm, reassuring smile, who gently squeezed her shoulder, saying softly, "Thank you for reminding us how important it is to open our hearts, even after pain." In the days that followed, Olivia and Toby became regular fixtures in the small group. Their story spread gently throughout Willow Creek, encouraging others to open their homes and hearts to animals in need. The community's bonds strengthened, fostered by shared compassion and collective understanding. For Olivia, this newfound purpose filled her days with meaning, and she recognized how Toby had unknowingly become not just her companion, but a bridge connecting her back to life and to the community around her. One quiet evening, as Olivia sat beside the fireplace, Toby nestled warmly by her feet. She gazed lovingly down at the young dog who had transformed her world. Softly stroking his fur, she felt a gentle peace wash over her heart, a peace born not from forgetting the past, but from embracing the present fully. She whispered gently, "You know, Toby, I thought I'd never feel whole again. But then you came along and reminded me that love is stronger than loss." Toby lifted his head, gazing up at her with eyes full of trust, gratitude, and unconditional affection. In that quiet exchange, Olivia knew they had both found exactly what they needed, a family rooted deeply in mutual love, trust, and the quiet strength of second chances. And as the autumn leaves drifted softly outside, Olivia realized that her heart, once fearful and closed, had finally blossomed fully open again. Beside her, Toby sighed contentedly, his small tail gently thumping the carpet, a simple, heartwarming reminder that healing and happiness were always possible, waiting only for the courage to open one's heart again. Sometimes, life gently teaches us that no heart is too broken to heal, no soul too lost to find its way home. Olivia and Toby discovered together that true companionship blossoms from courage, trust, and quiet acts of kindness, reminding us all that the strongest bonds are often born from gentle patience and unconditional love. If their story touched your heart, please consider subscribing so we can continue sharing journeys of hope, healing, and the powerful connection that animals and humans share, one heartfelt story at a time.